The code that changed everything. Margaret Hayes had cleaned the same penthouse office for 17 years, and in all that time, she had learned one simple truth. Rich folks had their troubles just like everybody else, they just had fancier rooms to worry in. At 58 years old, her knees weren't what they used to be, but her hands were still steady as she dusted the massive monitors in Harrison Caldwell's technology empire headquarters. The billionaire CEO was barely 45, one of those young geniuses who'd built something from nothing, and Margaret respected that. He worked hard, treated her with courtesy, and never once made her feel invisible the way some wealthy people did. Her son Elijah was 12 years old, bright as a new penny, and the absolute light of her life. School had let out early that Thursday afternoon due to a broken heating system, and Margaret's sister who usually watched him had come down with the flu. So here was Elijah, sitting quietly in the corner of the executive floor break room, homework spread out on the table, trying his best to be invisible. Margaret had raised him to understand that opportunities were precious things, that his behavior in spaces like this mattered, that the world would judge him differently and he had to be twice as good to get half as far. It was a conversation she wished she didn't have to have with her son, but wisdom meant facing truth head-on. She was polishing the glass conference table when she heard it. A voice, tight with panic, coming from Harrison Caldwell's private office. "I don't care what it takes, find the breach. We're losing money every second this system is down. $2 billion in trading algorithms just frozen." Frozen. Do you understand what that means? Margaret's heart started beating faster. She'd seen Mr. Caldwell frustrated before, but never frightened. And this was fear in his voice, raw and real. She continued her work, moving quietly, professionally. But she couldn't help noticing the way Harrison paced back and forth past his open door, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand running through his hair over and over. 3 different technical teams were on speakerphone, all talking over each other, throwing around words like corruption, cascade failure, and irreversible damage. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The sun was starting to set over the city skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of amber and gold. Margaret finished the executive bathroom and was heading back toward the break room when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The break room was empty. Elijah's backpack was still there, his math homework half finished, his pencil laid down mid-equation. But her son was gone. Margaret felt that old familiar fear that every parent knows, the one that starts in your stomach and climbs up your spine. She moved quickly through the hallways, checking the copy room, the supply closet, her sensible shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floors. Then she heard voices coming from Harrison's office. One was the billionaire's, still tight with stress. But the other voice made her heart stop completely. It was Elijah. Margaret rushed toward the office and stopped in the doorway, and what she saw made no sense at all. Her 12-year-old son was sitting in Harrison Caldwell's chair, his small frame dwarfed by the executive leather, his fingers moving across the keyboard with a speed and certainty that seemed impossible. Harrison stood behind him, completely still, staring at the screens with an expression Margaret couldn't quite read. "Elijah Marcus Hayes," Margaret said, her voice shaking, "you step away from that computer right this instant." But Harrison held up one hand, not taking his eyes off the screen. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Hayes, wait. Just wait one moment." Elijah's fingers kept moving, lines of code scrolling across multiple monitors. Green text on black backgrounds, numbers and symbols that looked like another language entirely. Margaret stood frozen, her mind racing through 1,000 terrible possibilities. Breaking into a billionaire's computer system. Security footage. Police. Her baby in handcuffs. "There," Elijah said quietly, pressing one final key. "That should do it." The screens flickered. Then, all at once, red error messages started turning green. Systems that had been frozen began moving again. Numbers started flowing across trading charts. And in the corner of the main monitor, a notification appeared in bright green text: "All systems operational. Error corrected. Backup restored." The silence in that office was so complete that Margaret could hear her own heartbeat. Harrison Caldwell stared at the screens for a long moment. Then he looked down at Elijah, this small boy in a too big t-shirt and worn sneakers, and said, "How did you do that?" Elijah shrugged, a gesture so casual it almost broke Margaret's heart. "The problem wasn't in your security system, sir. It was in the backup protocol. When the main system crashed, the backup tried to restore from a corrupted save point, which created a loop. Each time it tried to fix itself, it just reinforced the error. I just rolled it back to the last clean backup and rebuilt the connection protocol. Harrison sat down heavily in one of the guest chairs, the kind that probably cost more than Margaret's monthly rent. You're 12 years old. Yes, sir, Elijah said. Where did you learn to code like that? Elijah glanced at his mother, and Margaret saw something in his eyes she'd seen before but never quite understood. Pride mixed with shame, excitement tangled up with fear of being too much, too bright, too different. Library books, mostly, Elijah said. And there are free courses online. MIT posts their computer science lectures for free. I've been working through those after I finish my homework. Margaret found her voice, though it came out rough. Mr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. Elijah knows better than to touch other people's belongings. We'll leave right now, and I completely understand if you need to let me go. She was already calculating in her head. 2 months of savings would cover rent while she found another job. Elijah would be fine, he was resilient, they'd been through tight times before. But Harrison Caldwell was looking at her son with an expression she'd never seen before on his face. Wonder, maybe. Or recognition. Mrs. Hayes, he said slowly, do you know what your son just did? Broke into your computer system, Margaret said, her voice small. Sir, he knows right from wrong, I've raised him better than this, I promise you. He didn't break in, Harrison said. The system was already open because my entire technical team has been working on it for the last hour. What he did was solve a problem that 20 of the best programmers in the country couldn't figure out. He turned back to Elijah. Son, that bug has been costing my company $2 billion. Not in potential losses. In actual frozen assets that we couldn't access. Do you understand what I'm saying? Elijah nodded slowly. Harrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city as the last light faded from the sky. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer. More human. When I was 14 years old, I was a lot like you, he said. Taught myself to code because my family couldn't afford computer classes. Spent every free minute at the public library because we didn't have internet at home. I saw the world in patterns and problems. Puzzles waiting to be solved. He turned back to face them. But I had something you don't have. I had someone who saw what I could do and gave me a chance. Margaret felt tears burning in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd learned a long time ago that crying didn't change anything. My 7th grade teacher, Harrison continued, Mrs. Chen. She noticed I was reading coding manuals during lunch. So she stayed late 3 days a week to let me use the school's computer lab. No pay, no recognition, just kindness. She saw potential and decided to nurture it. He looked at Elijah. She changed my entire life. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of the city below. Mr. Caldwell, Margaret said carefully, what are you saying? Harrison smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. I'm saying that talent like this doesn't come along every day. I'm saying that your son has a gift, Mrs. Hayes. A real, genuine gift. And I'm saying that I'd like to help nurture that gift, if you'll allow me to. We don't need charity, Margaret said quickly, her pride flaring up before she could stop it. It's not charity, Harrison said gently. It's investment. Mrs. Hayes, I built this company on the backs of brilliant people who see the world differently. Your son is one of those people. He paused. I'd like to offer Elijah a mentorship. Access to our educational programs, time with our development team, proper computer equipment. And I'd like to offer you a new position, if you're interested. Director of Facilities Management, significant pay increase, full benefits. Because I have a feeling that managing a gifted child while working 2 jobs isn't easy. Margaret felt the world tilt sideways. She reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for us? Harrison looked at her for a long moment. Because someone did it for me, he said simply. Because talent deserves opportunity regardless of zip code. Because your son just saved my company $2 billion, and because I remember what it feels like to be brilliant and invisible at the same time. He held out his hand to Elijah. What do you say, young man? Want to learn from the best? Elijah looked up at his mother, his eyes wide and hopeful and scared all at once. Margaret saw her baby boy, but she also saw the man he could become. The opportunities spreading out before him like a map of a territory she'd never been able to reach herself. About all the nights she'd worked double shifts so Elijah could have new school supplies. All the times she'd gone without so he could have more. All the prayers she'd whispered into the darkness, asking for just one break, one chance, one open door. And here it was, standing right in front of them. Margaret nodded slowly. On one condition, she said, her voice stronger now. He keeps his grades up, he stays humble, and he never forgets where he came from. Deal, Harrison said, shaking Elijah's hand solemnly. Though something tells me, with a mother like you, forgetting where he came from was never really a risk. 3 months later, Margaret sat in her new office, a real office with her name on the door, and watched through the glass as Elijah worked with Harrison's development team. Her son was laughing at something one of the senior programmers had said, his fingers flying across a keyboard that cost more than their old car. But what made her heart swell wasn't the fancy equipment or the opportunity. It was the way Harrison stopped by Elijah's workstation, the way he took time to explain concepts, the way he treated her son like he mattered. Like he was seen. That evening, as they rode the bus home together, Elijah still chattering excitedly about machine learning algorithms, Margaret thought about all the invisible people in the world. All the talented children in all the quiet corners, brilliant and unseen. She thought about second chances and open doors. About the way one moment of kindness could change everything. About how the world judged you by where you started, but maybe, just maybe, it could also surprise you with where you ended up. Mom, Elijah said, tugging on her sleeve. Thank you for not being mad at me. Margaret pulled her son close, breathing in the smell of his hair, feeling the weight of him against her side. Baby, she said softly, I could never be mad at you for being exactly who you are. You just scared me, that's all. I'm sorry I scared you, Elijah said. I just saw the problem and I knew I could fix it and I didn't think about anything else. I know, Margaret said. That's what brilliant people do. They see solutions where others see walls. Don't ever lose that. She paused. But maybe next time, ask permission first. Elijah grinned, and Margaret laughed, and the bus carried them home through the city lights, two people whose lives had changed in the space of a heartbeat, in the moment when fear turned to hope and a door opened wide. Because sometimes the world breaks your way. Sometimes kindness finds you in the darkness. And sometimes a 12-year-old boy fixes a $2 billion problem and reminds us all that talent doesn't care about tax brackets, and genius doesn't check your address before it shows up. It just needs someone willing to see it. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope, second chances, and the beautiful ways that lives intersect and change each other. And please, leave a comment below telling us about a time someone saw your potential and gave you a chance. We'd love to hear your story too.